Black CEO denied withdrawal froze when she said I own this bank. The morning began like any other, but for the woman who walked through the tall glass doors of the city's biggest downtown bank, it was going to be a moment that changed everything. She wore a neat blazer, her hair carefully styled, and carried a leather handbag over her shoulder. To anyone watching, she looked like a professional on her way to an important meeting. She stepped up to the counter with calm confidence, but inside she was focused on one simple task: to withdraw money she needed urgently for a business expense. She had been through banks 1,000 times before and didn't expect today to be any different. The bank lobby was busy, filled with people waiting in line, some talking on their phones, others glancing impatiently at the clock. A few staff members moved behind the counters, typing into computers and checking documents. The woman stood patiently until it was her turn, then walked forward and greeted the teller with a polite smile. She handed over her account details and requested a large withdrawal. The teller froze for a moment, glanced at the slip, and then looked back at her. The teller's polite smile faded slightly as her eyes scanned the amount again. Instead of beginning the process, the teller leaned back slightly and cleared her throat. She asked the woman to wait for a moment. The woman nodded, still calm. The teller tapped something into the computer, then leaned toward another colleague, whispering quietly. Their eyes shifted to the woman, and there was a sense of hesitation in the air. Customers in line began to notice. Some looked curious, others irritated that the line was moving slower. The woman, however, stood gracefully, her expression patient, as if she had dealt with such things before. After a few minutes, the teller asked her for more identification. The woman handed over her driver's license, which matched the account perfectly. She also provided a debit card. Still, the teller frowned, as if something didn't quite fit. The woman kept her composure, waiting silently as the teller typed more into the computer. Finally, the teller excused herself and walked toward the manager's office at the back. The woman sighed softly, knowing this was about to turn into something more than a routine visit. The bank manager appeared, a middle-aged man in a suit who carried himself with authority. He walked over with a serious expression, glanced at the withdrawal slip, then looked at the woman. His tone was professional but laced with doubt. He asked why she needed such a large withdrawal and whether she understood that this was unusual. The woman responded calmly that it was for urgent business expenses, but the manager's face remained stiff. He questioned the balance in her account, hinting that maybe she didn't realize the true status of her funds. As this exchange went on, other customers started murmuring. A few craned their necks to get a better look. Security guards, who had been standing casually near the entrance, moved slightly closer to the counter. The air grew heavier, filled with suspicion. To anyone watching, it looked as if the woman was being treated like someone who had made a suspicious request, rather than a trusted customer. The woman remained steady. She didn't argue loudly, didn't raise her voice, and didn't let frustration show. Instead, she let her silence speak. The manager asked her to take a seat while they checked things further. She did, sitting in one of the stiff lobby chairs. She noticed how some customers glanced at her with judgment, whispering quietly. She also noticed a few others who looked uncomfortable, as though they could sense the unfairness of what was happening. The staff behind the counter kept casting glances her way, whispering among themselves. Minutes dragged into longer moments. The woman pulled a folder from her bag and rested it on her lap. She didn't open it yet, but simply held it. She knew the power it contained. She had walked into the bank quietly, like any other customer, but now it seemed her very presence had created a wall of doubt and disbelief. She sat straight, her posture calm, waiting for the right time to remind them who she truly was. The lobby buzzed with low conversation. Phones rang, pens scratched against paper, and keyboards clicked. But under that normal rhythm, there was an undercurrent of tension focused entirely on her. The teller whispered to the manager again, shaking her head as if still unsure. The woman watched them with steady eyes. What no one in that lobby knew was that the woman was not just a customer. She was far more than her neat blazer and quiet voice suggested. She was the head of the very institution they worked for, the person who signed documents that shaped the future of this bank. Yet at that moment, she was being judged only by the surface, and the disbelief of others was becoming a stage for something unforgettable. And so part 1 closes with her sitting quietly in that chair, holding her folder, as the staff whispered and doubted her. The customers watched. The security guards waited. She was calm, but inside, she knew the moment of truth was coming, and when it arrived, the entire room would be stunned into silence. The woman's patience was wearing thin, though she did not let it show on her face. She sat in the stiff chair while the bank manager whispered with his staff behind the counter. Every now and then, they glanced at her with doubt in their eyes, as if they were trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit their imagination. She had already given her identification, her account details, and even explained why she needed the withdrawal. Yet the more she explained, the more suspicion grew around her. The manager finally walked back toward her with a clipboard in hand. He didn't smile. His words were polite, but his tone was heavy with doubt. He asked her again, "Why do you need this much money in cash?" The woman answered calmly, "It's for business expenses, an urgent payment that cannot be delayed." Her voice was steady, showing no sign of nervousness. Still, the manager tilted his head slightly, as though he didn't believe her. He scribbled something on his paper, then said he would have to verify her account more thoroughly. Customers in the lobby whispered quietly among themselves. Some thought she was being difficult, others felt she was being treated unfairly. One man muttered under his breath, "Why don't they just give her the money if it's her account?" A young woman nearby shook her head, whispering, "They don't treat everyone the same." These quiet remarks floated around, and though the woman heard some of them, she chose not to respond. The teller returned to the counter, looking uneasy. She asked the woman if she had a work badge or some additional proof. The woman's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she reached into her purse and handed over another form of ID. It matched her name perfectly, the same name tied to the account. Still, hesitation lingered in the teller's eyes. She glanced back at the manager as though waiting for approval. The manager crossed his arms and said, "It's unusual for someone to request this kind of withdrawal. We need to be careful. Are you sure the balance in your account is correct? Perhaps you're mistaken." The woman's eyes locked on his. She spoke slowly, "I know my own account. I know what is in it. I wouldn't be here if I didn't." Her words carried strength, but the manager still looked doubtful. His tone grew firmer. He explained that without additional documentation, they couldn't approve such a transaction today. The woman remained calm. She asked, "So even with my ID, my account details, and my request, you are saying no?" The manager nodded stiffly. The teller kept her head down, uncomfortable with the tension building. A security guard shifted closer, standing a few feet away from the woman, his arms folded across his chest. The woman noticed but didn't react. She simply held her folder on her lap, the same folder that carried papers no one in the bank had seen yet. Her calmness contrasted with the manager's defensiveness. The lobby grew quieter as people realized this was no ordinary delay. Phones slipped into pockets, conversations stopped, and curious eyes turned toward the woman and the manager. Some looked embarrassed for the bank, others leaned in, eager to see what would happen next. The manager spoke again, repeating his refusal, as though rehearsing the same line, "We can't authorize this today without more paperwork. You'll need to come back another time." The woman sat straighter in her chair. Her face remained composed, but there was now a glimmer in her eyes that hinted at what was about to come. She asked him one more time, "Are you certain this is your final answer?" The manager, confident in his decision, nodded. He even waved his hand slightly, as if to dismiss her. "Yes," he said firmly. "We cannot proceed today." The air in the lobby grew thick. The woman glanced down at the folder in her lap, her fingers resting on its edge. She took a slow breath, her silence speaking louder than any argument she could make. Around her, customers watched with wide eyes, waiting for her next move. She had been underestimated and dismissed, but she knew the truth she carried in that folder would soon turn the entire scene upside down. The woman sat still, her calmness creating a strange tension in the room. The bank manager believed he had the final word. He stood tall, his arms folded, thinking he had handled the situation with authority. The teller avoided eye contact, and the security guard stayed nearby, watching closely as if trouble might start at any moment. Customers leaned in with curiosity, whispering among themselves, some even pulling out their phones, ready to record if things turned dramatic. But the woman did not raise her voice. She did not argue. Instead, she placed her hand gently on the folder that had been resting on her lap since the beginning. Slowly, she stood up from her chair. Her movement was graceful yet powerful enough to silence even the whispers around her. The manager frowned, clearly annoyed, but also slightly uneasy as he watched her step toward the counter. She placed the folder directly on the polished surface in front of the teller and looked straight into the manager's eyes. The room grew even quieter. Her voice was steady, calm, and clear. "You are refusing my request. You are doubting my account. You believe I do not belong here. Is that correct?" The manager cleared his throat, trying to sound confident. "Ma'am, I'm simply following policy. We cannot allow this kind of withdrawal without further documentation." She nodded slowly. Then, with careful precision, she opened the folder. Inside were documents neatly arranged in protective sleeves. She slid one of them across the counter toward the manager. He hesitated before picking it up. His eyes scanned the heading, then the signature at the bottom. His lips parted slightly, and his confident posture began to fade. The teller leaned forward to see what it was, her hands trembling slightly. Other staff members glanced nervously at one another, sensing something was very wrong. The customers could not see the papers clearly, but they could feel the energy shifting. The woman let the silence linger before speaking again. Her words echoed through the lobby. "This account is mine. This bank is mine. I am not just a customer here. I am the owner of the institution you work for." The entire room froze. The words struck with force, bouncing from wall to wall, leaving everyone in disbelief. The security guard, who had been standing ready, stepped back awkwardly, unsure of his role anymore. The teller gasped softly, her face turning pale. The manager blinked rapidly, reading the document again as if hoping he had misunderstood. But the truth was there, stamped with official seals and signed with her name. The woman stood tall, her presence commanding the room without a single raised voice. She didn't boast, she didn't shout, she simply revealed the truth. And that truth hit harder than any argument could have. The customers were stunned. A young man whispered, "Did she just say she owns the bank?" Another woman covered her mouth in shock. Phones were lifted higher now, capturing the moment as people realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The manager's hands shook slightly as he tried to speak. I didn't know. I had no idea." His voice cracked. The power he once carried in the room slipped away, leaving him exposed and embarrassed. The teller's eyes filled with regret, and the other staff members stood frozen in disbelief. But the woman wasn't done. She looked around the lobby, her gaze sweeping across the customers and employees. Her calm tone cut through the silence. "This is not about money. This is about judgment. You doubted me, not because of policy, but because of assumption. You treated me as though I did not belong, when in truth, this entire building belongs to me." Her words were not angry, but they carried weight. The truth was undeniable, and every person in that room felt it. The room that once hummed with whispers now stood completely still, waiting to see what she would say next. And in that moment, the clash between assumption and reality had reached its peak. The bank staff had dismissed her, the manager had refused her, and the security guard had prepared to watch her leave defeated. But instead, she had turned the entire situation on its head with one powerful truth: she was not just another customer, she was the one in charge of everything around them. The atmosphere had changed forever. What began as doubt and dismissal was now transforming into shock and realization. And while the manager's mouth opened and closed with apologies he couldn't yet form, the woman simply stood tall, holding her dignity like armor. The bank lobby was frozen in silence. It was as though time itself had stopped the moment the woman declared, with calm certainty, that she owned the institution they were standing in. Her words had echoed across the marble floor and bounced off the tall glass walls, leaving everyone stunned. The air that had once been filled with murmurs of doubt now carried only the sound of shallow breathing and nervous shuffling. The manager, who only minutes earlier had spoken with such authority, now stood pale and stiff. His hands trembled as he looked again at the document she had placed before him. His eyes moved from the bold company letterhead to her signature at the bottom. He could feel beads of sweat forming along his forehead. He had dismissed her as just another demanding customer, but now he realized he had been speaking to the very person who signed his paycheck. The teller's face flushed pink. She had been the one to start the chain of suspicion. Her voice cracked when she tried to speak, but no words came out. The other staff shifted uneasily, their eyes darting toward the woman and then down at the floor, as if avoiding eye contact might erase their guilt. The security guard, who had stepped closer earlier, now stood frozen in embarrassment. He lowered his gaze, quietly retreating a step back, unsure whether he should stay or leave. For the first time since the situation began, he looked less like a guard and more like someone who had been caught on the wrong side of truth. Around the lobby, customers were wide-eyed. Some covered their mouths, shocked by what they had just heard. A few whispered in disbelief, while others pulled out their phones to record, realizing this moment would become a story told far beyond these walls. A young man whispered to his friend, "She really owns the bank." Another customer shook his head and said, "They treated her like she was nothing. And she's the one who runs it all." The woman herself stood still, her posture tall, her voice calm. She did not gloat. She did not raise her tone. She simply let the truth rest heavy in the air. Her dignity was intact, and her silence now spoke louder than any argument could. The manager finally found his voice. His words stumbled out clumsily. "Ma'am, I had no idea. Please forgive me. This was a misunderstanding. We didn't mean any disrespect." His apology sounded hollow, forced by the weight of exposure rather than sincerity. The woman tilted her head slightly, her eyes steady. "It was not just a misunderstanding," she replied softly. "It was an assumption. You judged me before you even knew who I was." Her words hit harder than her revelation. The staff lowered their heads, unable to deny the truth. The customers nodded quietly, recognizing the lesson in what was unfolding before them. The teller, tears welling in her eyes, whispered, "I'm so sorry." But the woman did not answer. She kept her gaze on the manager, who shifted uncomfortably under her calm stare. The manager tried to regain control of the situation. He motioned for the teller to process the withdrawal immediately, his voice sharp with urgency. "Quickly, give her what she requested," he ordered, hoping his obedience would undo the damage. But it was too late. Respect could not be ordered, it had to be earned. And in this moment, he had lost it. The woman looked around the room once more. The silence was thick, the weight of realization pressing down on every person present. She had revealed the truth not to humiliate them, but to teach them. And the lesson was unforgettable: never underestimate someone based on appearance. The teller's hands shook as she began to process the transaction, typing faster than she ever had before. The security guard kept his head bowed, while the manager stood awkwardly, trying to look busy but unable to hide his shame. Customers whispered quietly, their voices carrying respect for the woman who had turned the entire room upside down with a single sentence. The woman waited patiently, her dignity never slipping. She had not come to make a scene, but the scene had found her. And now, as her withdrawal was finally being processed, everyone in that lobby knew they would never forget the day they learned who she really was. The lobby was filled with an unusual kind of silence, one that carried both respect and guilt. The woman stood tall, her presence commanding the entire room. The teller was still typing nervously, rushing to process the transaction she had once doubted. The manager shifted uncomfortably, his earlier arrogance replaced by regret. The customers, who had watched every moment unfold, were now holding their breaths, as though waiting for the woman to deliver a final word that would seal the lesson of the day. When the teller finally slid the money across the counter with trembling hands, the woman accepted it without hesitation. She placed the money carefully into her folder and closed it. Then she turned around slowly, facing the lobby full of wide eyes and quiet whispers. Her calm expression carried more power than anger ever could. Her voice was steady, but there was a warmth in it, the kind of tone that made people lean closer, eager to hear every word. Today, she said softly, I was not treated as a person. I was treated as a problem. I followed the rules, I gave my identification, I answered every question. Yet, it was not enough. Why? Because assumptions stood in the way. The room remained silent. No one dared interrupt. Even the phones recording her trembled slightly in the hands that held them. She continued, I did not come here to prove who I am. I came here to make a simple transaction. But your doubts forced me to reveal what I would have preferred to keep quiet. I am the CEO. I am the owner of this bank. And yet, you treated me like I did not belong. A few customers nodded, their eyes filled with agreement. The manager lowered his gaze to the floor, his earlier pride shattered. The teller covered her mouth with her hand, ashamed of how she had acted. The woman's eyes swept across the room once more. This is not about me. This is about everyone who has ever been judged unfairly. Everyone who has been made to feel small because of their appearance, their background, or their identity. You never know who someone truly is, or what they have achieved. Respect should never depend on assumption. Respect should be the starting point. Her words landed heavily in every heart present. Some customers looked emotional, as if they had been through similar experiences themselves. Others bowed their heads, realizing they had silently accepted the unfairness until now. The woman picked up her folder and prepared to leave. Before walking away, she turned once more to the staff. I don't need apologies. I need you to remember this moment. The next time someone stands at this counter, do not see them through your own doubts. See them as they are, a person worthy of respect. The security guard quickly stepped aside, his head lowered. The teller whispered another apology, but the woman gave only a small, polite nod. The manager tried to say something more, but his words were swallowed by the heavy silence that hung over him. With that, the woman walked toward the glass doors. Each step echoed like a reminder that dignity, once tested, shines brighter than ever. The customers parted quietly, some smiling at her with admiration, others still whispering about the unbelievable truth they had just witnessed. When she stepped outside into the daylight, the cool air hit her face, and she took a deep breath. She did not need to look back. She knew the entire lobby would be changed forever. The staff would carry the memory of their mistake, the customers would share the story with their families, and the video recordings would spread far beyond those walls. The lesson was clear, never underestimate someone by their appearance. Behind quiet eyes and steady patience can lie a power greater than anyone imagines. And that day, in that bank, the woman had not just withdrawn her money, she had deposited a truth into every heart that had watched her.